welcome to the stage, Mike Cho!
Oh, that was amazing. So I will tell you something that some of my close friends don't even know about me. And that is that through my whole life, I've struggled with often crippling social anxiety and social awkwardness. And it comes and goes, but even on the best days, like I can always just feel it there right under the surface. And sometimes I can just hear somebody laughing or talking even in the next room or down the block, and I'll just suddenly be convinced that they're laughing at me and they're whispering and pointing and staring at me. So there are, because of this, like I hate going to parties because I'm terrible at them, and that makes me feel terrible, and so I hate parties. This has been with me long enough that I've picked up all the little tricks that you learn to get you through life, or at least get you through the day. You can practice smiling and saying hello in the mirror. You have this running list of conversation topics just constantly rolling in your head in case you run into somebody that you know and you have to talk about something. One trick that I picked up that I like is to always carry a camera around with me. And this helps for a lot of reasons. First, obviously, the lens and the screens and the viewfinder and all that, they create this safety barrier between you and the rest of this world, this distance, a safety barrier. I also like it because when people see you with a camera, and not just a camera phone, but an actual camera with like buttons and dials and all that on it, that automatically gives you a reason to be somewhere. Like you're the photo guy, you're there to take pictures. Otherwise, you're just a guy standing by himself in the middle of a crowded room, just waiting for that thing you think is supposed to happen. So there are good days and there are bad days. And this day in February, 3 years ago, this was actually a good day anxiety-wise, even if it was pretty bad in all the other regards. Like I hadn't eaten since before noon. I hadn't been sleeping. I'd been having a rough week at work, my 9 to 6 job, and I just worked a full day and had done a 3-hour volunteer shift on top of that. So I was exhausted and I was starving, but even so, I was running across town from West 13th and 7th Avenue to Houston Avenue A. And I was happy. I was happy because the hard part of the day was over. And I was going to meet my friend Mimian, and we were going to see a show together. Mimian and I, we were at Mercury Lounge. We were there to see Mark Eitzel. He's a singer-songwriter that had been a favorite of ours for many years. Mark Eitzel sang for a band called American Music Club that I discovered when I was in college, at that exact magic age where you first discover and really fall in love with music. In American Music Club, they sang these epic poems of longing and heartbreak and addiction, and they were just dripping with irony and pitch black humor. And that was my life in the 90s. And Mark Eitzel, his solo stuff, it was brooding and intense and kind of terrifying. And the man himself is brooding and intense and kind of terrifying. And the room is crowded from our spot at the front of the stage, and it's super hot. Like they had cranked up the heat when they first arrived in the afternoon and had left it on all day. And Mark Eitzel, he begins playing this song that I really love called Patriots Heart. It has this great lyric in it that says, "Give me all your money and don't tell me what you're thinking. I'm the past you wasted. I'm the future you're obliterating," because that is my life today. And then, more out of habit and just because I always have it with me more than anything else, I pick up my point and shoot camera and I begin taking pictures. And Mark Eitzel, he brings the song to a dead stop and he looks directly at me and he says, could you stop that? Could you put that down, please? And immediately I drop the camera, but it's too late. And I look around and I see all of these 200 ghost faces around the room, just lit up by the different colored stage lights, just slowly turning to face me. And the irony is not escaping me at this moment that here's this device that is supposed to protect me from people staring at me, and now is the very cause of it. And Mark Eitzel, he's not being mean about it. He makes a joke. He says, oh, cameras just make me think too much about how I look, and then I can't play. So, of course, everyone in the audience starts shouting, you look great! And someone says, I like your necktie, to which he responds by ripping it off his neck and throwing it on the ground. And then he says, all right, I don't feel like playing that song anymore. And then he starts flipping through his iPad for something else to sing. So now, not only have I been called out and scolded from stage by one of my heroes and completely shamed myself in front of this crowd, now that he is skipping the song, I've literally ruined the show. And this is when the panic attack starts. So if you've never had a panic attack, I promise you they do great things for your breathing and your stomach and your blood pressure. So my heart is exploding in my chest, and I can feel every fluid in my body just rushing up through my throat and choking me. And my toes start tingling and they go numb. And my fingers start tingling and they go numb. And I start getting this incredible buzzing lightheadedness, this, like the kind of lightheadedness where you can actually feel yourself leaving your body. And it's something that has happened to me all too many times. It's not every day, but it only happens on the worst days. And it's happened often enough that I know that the only way to get through it is to just close my eyes and slow down and write it out. So I close my eyes and I slow down and I write it out. And I wake up and I'm on the floor. And Mimian is frantically shaking my shoulder. Are you okay? Do you know where you are? Do you know what day of the week it is? And I look around and I see all of the 200 ghost faces are bearing down on me. And this time I know it's not an irrational delusion, because not only have I passed out in the middle of this crowded club, and not only have I stopped the show again, but on my way down, I had slammed the back of my head against the edge of this concrete step, and I had split the back of my head open, and there was blood everywhere. There's a woman behind Mimian who neither of us have ever met, and I can hear her calling for an ambulance. The bartender or a manager or somebody hands me a towel that I think is clean, and I hold it to the back of my head. And then once he sees I'm okay, then he quickly escorts us out the emergency side exit, which is great because I truly would not have survived being paraded down the middle of that room through all those faces. Except the emergency exit just leads to a hallway that exit out's right next to the front door of the club. So now I'm sitting down on that little stool where the doorman usually sits to check IDs and hand stamps. And instead of having been paraded past all of the faces are now parading past me out the front door. And this is made even worse because I know that means that the rest of the show has been canceled. And maybe the whole rest of the night has been canceled. And maybe the health department's on the way to burn the entire building to the ground. The paramedics arrive and they check my vitals. They ask me how much I've had to drink. And Mimian jumps to my defense and said he had one beer, which, by the way, I didn't even finish and I didn't even really want. I just needed something to hold in my hand, which is another great trick, by the way. So that is my first ever ambulance ride. And 2.5 hours laying in the emergency room later, that is my first ever MRI. And then 2 hours after that, the doctor comes by and tells me that I did not have a seizure and I do not have a concussion, and all she has to do is patch me up and I'd be free to go. And all night I had been dreading getting stitches. The doctor says that they don't use stitches on scalp injuries. First they would have to shave the injury area, which she finds upsets the patients more than the injury itself. And also the skin on the scalp is too tough and too thick and too much work to yank the needles through. So she says that instead of stitches, they use staples. And out of her coat pocket, she pulls this white plastic Star Trek phaser looking thing. And she asks me if I'm ready. And she pushes it under the back of my head. And without even the indignity of the old 3-2-1 fake out, she pulls the trigger and ka-chunk!
Ka-chunk!
I feel these two giant industrial carpet staples being driven into my skull. So it's after 4 a.m. By the time Mimi and I are outside the hospital. And Mimian has stayed with me the entire time. And I will forever be grateful for her, to her for that. And she's sitting back there if you want to buy her a drink later. And Mimian, she tells me not to be embarrassed, that this kind of thing could have happened to anybody, and who cares what other people think. And she jokes that next time we go to see a show, we absolutely have to eat before and not after. And then she asks me if I happen to notice that while we were sitting by the door waiting for the ambulance, that among the parade of faces passing by us out the door, that there was Mark Eitzel himself, just walking out of the club, disappearing onto the sidewalk. And I say, yes, I did notice. Just walk right past us. He had to have seen us. It would have been impossible for him not to have seen us. But, you know, there he was, just guitar case in hand, out the door, out onto the sidewalk. And, you know, it's late, and Mimian and I, we're exhausted, and we're still a little freaked out by the whole thing that has happened. But we just start laughing. We're laughing out there on the sidewalk in front of the hospital, and we're laughing like Dave Grohl would have stopped. Eddie Vedder absolutely would have stopped. Like Lenny Kravitz would have sent the fucking muffin basket. So it takes me the whole rest of the weekend to work up the nerve to take a shower and wash the rest of the dried blood out of my hair, and to actually touch my fingers to the wound. And I actually take a picture of it on my phone just to see how bad it looks. And I'm surprised to see that what I thought were these two giant industrial carpet staples were actually just regular office staples. These two sharp, spiky things that felt so enormous in my skull and so insurmountable in my head were just regular, tiny little office staples. And by the end of the week, I'm showing them off to anyone who wants to see them, surprisingly few. And then when I go to have them taken out, I ask the nurse if I can keep them. And she looks at me like, okay, weirdo. Like I'm the only one who's ever asked to keep the staples that have been stuck in their head for a week. And I still have them. I have them in a little Ziploc bag in a drawer at home. And I'm sure anyone coming across them, finding this bag with these two little bent staples, gonna wonder, like, why the hell did you keep these? But when I look at them, I think, yeah, you know, sometimes the things in my head really are as big as I think they are. But at least that one time, at least that one February night, they really weren't. So just one little funny PS to the story is there's a music journalist named Mac Randall who was at the show that night. And in his write-up of the show, he described the whole incident as the most unsettling sequence of events I've witnessed in 30 years of concert going. So I've decided that if I ever get a book published or I'm in a show or any situation where I have to write a bio, I get to officially say that I am responsible for the most unsettling sequence of events witnessed in 30 years of concert going. Thanks.